Welcome. My name's Gary. I've been doing a series of YouTube videos about the astronomical program called Siril for, I think, almost 3 years now. It started with a DSLR and a tracker and has advanced. Now it's kind of astrocam on one of two scopes. One of them is pictured in this image, the Newt, and we'll be using images from that one today throughout this tutorial. Now, Siril just released version 1.2 beta 2, which was huge. It has a lot of new things. And I've struggled with how to present everything in a kind of timely manner, and it's difficult. I've tried to record this a couple of times, it got very long. So I thought the easiest thing today would just be to work a stack, uh, basically from beginning to end, and we'll trip on some of these things. Other things I will talk about as we go along and run into them. So hopefully that will be an effective workflow. This is one of the images we're going to do. I'm going to demonstrate a different kind of pixel math to accomplish something like this. Excuse me. And but the main one's going to be a recent shoot I did on M106, a galaxy shot. Fairly quick and easy to run through all that in a tutorial. Okay, but one of the first things I wanted to talk about is when I started doing stuff on Siril, there was almost no documentation of any kind. There were no YouTube resources, very few written resources, and that has changed big time, especially with this latest release. If you look here, they have documents, they have FAQs, and tutorials. Now, the tutorials um, are dedicated to a certain task, and there's some really, really good stuff in here. They've got working with comments. So if you've got comment images from recently, this might be of interest to you. But what's also new is Starnet integration. And particularly for comments, this is cool because you can comment align a stack and, and then export a sequence of images. Now, Starnet has the ability to remove stars from a sequence. So now you can take your comet stabilized stack and remove all the stars and then stack those. You don't need stars because registration's been done while comet aligning. So this is pretty powerful. The generalized hyperbolic stretch, we'll be looking at that today, but it's been done by other YouTubers. There's a channel called Deep Space Astro. He's been doing some very good work with Siril. So when I come upon these tools, I'm not going to talk about all the details and complexity of them, but try to share something about each that optimizes its use. There's a pixelmath module here, Starnet integration, so on and so forth. Now, in the FAQ, if you stumble onto an issue of some kind, its chances are other people have too, and they've got a lot of really good things in here. I'm just going to go back to tutorials for a second. I wanted to mention one other one. If you have a camera without amp glow, I have two 533s. The synthetic biases article might be of interest to you. This is where instead of shooting dark flats or bias frames, you just subtract offset from your flats to calibrate them. I've been doing that ever since Cyril added the capability, and I think it's the only program that can do that, either by scripting or just by command line. You can subtract the uh, camera offset from your biases. That puts them on the same pedestal as the lights that have had this dark subtracted. So um, quick, easy, and you don't have the noise injection that comes with doing a flat calibration with biases, for instance. Okay, and then what's new with Serial version 1.2 is the documents section. And we'll just look at online documents, but there's a lot of stuff in here. And if you click on any of these headings, there are subheadings. And this differs from the tutorials because it's written at a different time and presumably by different people. But if you're interested in a subject like photometry, there's a tutorial on it, and the tutorial has a link to GNU plot for light curves. The document here does not. So it's good to read both aspects of those things. So I wanted to talk about that. Now I'm just going to move into a folder here that has some sequences we're going to make use of. Double click on a fit file. This will bring up Siril. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go to the sequence tab, search sequences. What I'm interested in is the R registered total sequence. I have pre-processed lights from one imaging session and pre-processed lights from a second imaging session. And then I made a new sequence out of all of them called total.seq and registered them. So we're just going to start out with the registered sequence here. Put it in an auto stretch view. Now, we're all familiar with the screen. In auto stretch, there's a new button down here where you can just take out the extra green channel. It doesn't actually change anything. For instance, if you do an actual stretch, it's still going to be green. Clicking this button down here has not changed anything about that, so we're not going to apply that. But when we stack these, well, I'll get to that in a moment. Now, one thing a person can do, let's go into image information, preferences. A few new things in here. Miscellaneous. They have Starnet integration, but you need to download the Starnet command line version. It just unzips into any folder on your machine. And in Siril, you use this setting to point at the executable, and that hooks it up, and you're good to go. There's another one here for GNU plot. GNU plot, I'm not sure how you say that, installation directory. Now, for this, there's no way to find that unless you can find it with Google search, or if you go into the tutorial on photometry, they have a link there to GNU plot. I have not installed it on my machine, but this is where you would hook it up. Now in astrometry, there's something else also new. In the past, if you did a plate solve or a photometric color calibration, it went to the internet for the data. Now there's a link right here under astrometry, local star catalogs, that will pop open a web page, and you can find the link in here that interests you. I just use this one right here where you can right click and download the individual files. Let's have a look and see what's there. Okay, here we are. We need these 4 compressed files, .dat, .xz, and those are all compressed files. So after you download them, you need something like 7-zip or something like that to get the DAT file out of there. Put them on a folder anywhere on your machine, and then you can point to them in these settings here. And all of a sudden, plate solving and photometric calibration, color calibration are on your machine, and they're almost instant. I'll give you an example. We just have one sub loaded up here. Let's just run a color calibration. Oh, sorry, we can't. We actually have to open one. I'll just grab the same reference frame. Now instead of the sequence being open, it's now the actual frame. Okay, the image had the coordinates built in, the focal length, the pixel size. I'm not going to let it flip. Click OK. It's plate solved and it's color calibrated. It's almost instant now. It's like a miracle. So I'm not going to save that. We'll go back to sequence and load up the total sequence again. Now that's that same image, but because I didn't save it, we've gone back to the green version. Okay, now these are already pre-processed, which means they've been calibrated. So this is another new thing. The pre-process tab has been changed to the calibration tab. And similarly in scripts, any script you have that calls for pre-processing the word is now calibration in the script. The old ones will still work, but you'll see a red line in the console running through saying that this command has been depreciated, and there will come a day when the command is gone. So uh, best to just search the word preprocess in all the scripts and change it to calibrate. Anyways, we are registered, so I'm going to go to the plot. Now, this is something in the new version. We have some new variables here. We have the number of stars. Now, I'd be concerned about this image right here because the number of stars is very low. We have the background. Um, that gives you an idea. In this case, if you're shooting towards morning, the background starts getting darker or lighter rather. You'll see a distinct curve there. And it can also help find when clouds passed over, anything else weird happened, maybe a light got flashed in your OTA. You'll see a very, very high background all of a sudden. The other ones are kind of normal. Now, before, in order to get at those things, we had to, well, I'm going to talk about that part once we've stacked. What we had to do was run photometry on a star, and then we had some of these variables. Like right now, we have registration here. You cannot click that. You cannot do anything. Now, another thing, though, you can do is interrelate these. You can go around this versus um, full width half maximum. So full width half maximum is on the high side here, and roundness, sorry, full width half maximum higher is up here. So, and roundness, better is to the right on this axis, better is to the bottom. So Siril has picked a reference frame close to the bottom right. Um, I think they usually would use full width half maximum. Yeah, it picks the lowest one. That's always the reference frame. But I mean, you could take, for whatever reason, other ones if you want, and make it into the reference frame before you stack. But I've always just taken their suggestion. I think the easiest way to look at this, though, is just by frame, and then I kind of scroll through. Um, the whole second session here has a higher um, full width half maximum, which means lower quality of stars. I think it had something to do with my brand new autofocuser, which didn't really work out of the box. I had to update the firmware, and it has a lot of backlash. So I was having some issues with that. The older one worked beautifully, but anyways, the older one is now in my Red Cat, so there's not much I can do about that. Don't see any huge problems there. Roundness. Okay, there's a couple I don't like. 0.8 is kind of a nice number. I'm not going to slice out that many subs, though. I might go this far. Now, this is something else kind of new in the plot you can do. You can highlight these ones, right click, exclude selected points, and they're gone. In fact, let's open this up, and I'm just going to include all the images again. Yeah, so now the ones I'd previously rejected are in there. So there's some stuff here that I took out earlier. So you just draw a box, then it has to include the actual point. Right click, exclude. Then I'm going to go to roundness. Okay, under 0.7, no, I'm not taking those. In fact, I think I'll go like this. Exclude. Okay, that's all in a range. I can live with that. I'll check background. Okay, this one obviously I was shooting into the dawn. I'm actually going to have a look here. I'm going to right click and show. Yeah, this was getting into the dawn, and there's enough background loss there that we're losing detail in the subs. So I think I'm just going to take, whoop, close this out. I'm just going to draw a box around all these ones and exclude those ones. So now if we go to stacking, we're stacking 95 out of the 108. A couple of things in stacking. Average stacking with rejection is what most of us do, additive with scaling. I don't do recompute or faster normalization. They're both kind of short well, recompute force is a recomputation of normalization. It's done on the first run. You don't have to do that again. Pixel rejection. If you got a large number of subs like this, I've been using linear fit clipping or GESD. Um, they're both very good with larger numbers of subs. If I'm dealing with my new narrowband camera, I maybe have 10 or 15 5-minute subs. I go with Winsorized Sigma clipping because it gets the satellites better on a lower number of subs. And so that's kind of a choice you can make. Something else I've started messing with is median stacking. Um, if you study in photography, median distribution versus average distribution, median can be sharper. And again, if you have a large number of subs, um, it can kind of make sense to give it a try. And if you don't end up with satellite trails and all that kind of stuff because they get averaged away, it could actually give some extra detail. So first thing I'm going to do is go to average with rejection, linear fit, weighting. We can weight by the number of stars. That's a pretty good one actually, because if something goes wrong, the star count falls. And so this gives more credence to the image with higher numbers of stars. You can also go by full width half maximum, by noise levels, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to hit number of stars here. Output normalization, I don't do that so much. It makes the final stack dimmer. I mean, really almost down to nothing. So I'm not quite sure of a good reason to use that. You could experiment with it if you like. RGB equalization. This is a good thing. The final stack will not be green. I mean, you can get rid of it easily anyways, but this is kind of a good one. I am going to just let me have a quick look at the folders I have here. Tutorial. Okay. I am going to put this into ..slant. So now it's just going to drop the stack into that tutorial folder, and the sequence name will be our total stacked.fit. So let's just hit stacking. Take 30 seconds or 45 seconds, something like that. It's a fairly high sub count, but we'll just have a quick look and see what we get. Okay, I paused that for a minute, and we're stacked now. Before I change directories to go over and work with this image, though, I just wanted to show a couple of more things about photometry and astrometry. So I'm going to reload the sequence now. We have a plot with information. We have registration information here, as I mentioned earlier, but nothing else is available. So what else can we do with this? Okay, there's a few things here. If you know the name of something, first thing I'm going to do is plate solve this. No flipping. Okay, that is done. Now, I happen to know there's no stars here I can really search for, but if there was, we could search for it. But let's just search for NGC 4248. That is something that is there. So we can right-click, search object. Now, if you were looking for a variable star, this would be a good way to find it if you knew its designation. So we're going to search NGC 4248, hit enter, and it brings up the annotations, but it's added this orange one here as a search result. So this can be useful for finding things once your plate's solved. Now let's go back to the plot, and we can also, a lot of people draw a box and then right-click for options. In Siril, you can also press your middle mouse button. Let's just pick a star here. And it will draw a good size box for photometry. In other words, you can right-click on this now and go for PSF. It gives you the basic information about the star in this image, maximal intensity, relative magnitude. There's a way to convert that closer to absolute magnitude. That'll be the subject of a different video. An SNR, signal to noise ratio. Yeah, and there's also a more details. So we can click on that and it will pop open a Simbad page with more information about this star. Okay, it has different designators available down here. I'm going to just copy this. Control C. More information. I don't really know how to interpret this or even how to get a magnitude. I think these are magnitudes with different filters. Not quite certain about that, but if you're into that kind of thing, there is more stuff available there. You can also turn on this button now that we're plate solved and click anywhere, and it'll find the nearest star and give you very much the same result with a single left click. You can, with this button selected, you can right click on a star. And what that does is it runs a PSF on the sequence. So I'm going to do this, and you see this option, PSF for the sequence. That right clicking with this button pressed is the same thing. So now we have, instead of registration, we have photometry available here. And there's magnitude, there's amplitude, which is the maximum brightness of any point in the star, brownness across the sequence, FWHM on that star across the sequence. And the reason I forgot earlier is that for this being higher is the second session was 180 second subs. The first session was 120 second subs. You can also now click on Julian date. This kind of denotes that session 1 was shot on one day and session 2 was shot a couple of days later. And you can turn your FWMH from pixels to arc seconds on the scale here too. So that's actually kind of useful depending on the focal length and pixel scale and all that kind of stuff. If you turn on magnitude, let's say this was a variable star. You've now got information about it in terms of magnitude. Now you could, let's turn this on to make it quick and easy, try to select a bunch of other stars that you might call reference stars. And it starts plotting them each, and they're color balanced or color coded. So the purple one, let's say that was our variable star. The first one would be the variable, the other ones are references. If you install GNU plot, you can at this point hit light curve and it'll analyze the magnitude of the first star as compared to the reference stars, and it'll give you a light plot, so like exoplanet transiting, that kind of thing. And if you image with Nina, you can put a plugin into Nina, and apparently it can, in your field of view, determine those reference stars, similar magnitude and all that kind of stuff. And if you use that and generate a CSV file from Nina, then you can click on this and locate the CSV file and open it, and it'll just do it all automatically, then hit your light curve. Anyways, so photometry basically gives us SNR, magnitude, and amplitude. These other ones are now available. Background and FWHM are now available in registration. That's fairly recent. Until recently, background number of stars was not in registration. You had to do photometry to kind of get in on that. Okay, that stack is done. I'm going to change our working directory to this tutorial folder. Open. And now we're going to open that stacked image that we just created. And first thing I usually do is put it into a histogram view. I'm looking for bad gradients, anything like that. You can see the stacking artifacts. I think what I will do right now is do a crop. Okay. Something's gone dead here. One moment. Okay, I figured it out. I still had this button pressed. It's one reason I don't like to use it. I'd rather just draw my selections and right click for the options, because if you forget to turn that off, it changes what the mouse does. So we're just going to draw a crop that's sufficient to clear the stacking artifacts. And I guess if I wanted to, I could crop it to the final crop factor, but that's easily done later. So I'm just going to take care of that right now. First thing I want to do is plate solve this. We won't let it flip, so that now our information is available. And it's interesting, this search we did for NGC 4248 has stuck in there. Okay, now the second thing I'd like to do is a color calibration, a photometric color calibration. Now we're already plate solved, so it doesn't need to do that again at this point. So I'm just going to click OK. And what that's done is neutralize the background to a known value and put some color in some stars. In this case, only 33. This is not a rich star field. Sometimes it's in the hundreds or thousands of stars that it photometrically calibrates. And at this point, I'm going to press Save to lock in those changes. We're still linear, but if I mess up something and have to come back, this will be our future starting point. Now, a couple of other new things. Siril finally has effective deconvolution. This is not the best image for that, because the stars are actually pretty good and it'll be hard to get a light enough deconvolution to have good effect. But on some other rich star field stuff, I've found it to be very effective. Now, there's some options here. Blind deconvolution. In that case, Siril will run kind of a PSF on the image and try to select the proper stars to run produce a PSF preview. A better way to do it is, I'm not good enough to do manual PSF. I really couldn't do that. So I'm going to go PSF from stars, but what we need is a PSF model to draw from. There's two ways to get at that. The old way is image information, dynamic PSF. The new way is under star processing. You can launch the same dialog from here. And I'll just close that up. We're going to search all stars, and this comes up with a list of all the stars it found and their various parameters. We're going to sort on amplitude. And in the serial tutorial on this, they say you do not want any stars of extremely low amplitude or extremely high amplitude. So they suggest cutting off at about amplitude 0.1. Okay, so I'm just going to go Shift, click, selects everything above that, and hit the minus sign. So those stars are no longer in the calculation. And then the upper cutoff they suggest is amplitude 0.7, and there's only one star here like that. So we will also remove that from the PSF, and we can close that. The stars remain selected. Now we can go generate PSF. And this is the kind of star shape it's calculated as desirable or existing, I'm not sure exactly. And the PSF has changed from PSF from stars to previous. So the model is saved, and we can actually unselect those stars if we wish. I think I'll just leave them. But we now have a PSF model generated. Richardson-Lucy is for deep space. The other two are more geared towards planetary or lunar surface, that kind of thing. The most important variables here are the iterations and the gradient descent step size. With the limited experimentation I've been able to do, I found that on a linear image, probably have to cut the iterations, maybe the gradient descent, to get a small enough effect. If the image is slightly stretched, these might be just right, and if it's more stretched, you would have to increase the parameters to have effect. But the idea here is that a star millions of light years away is a point source of light, and we're shooting through an atmosphere, and the light gets bent and twisted as we captured it, and it becomes bigger. So the whole idea of deconvolution is to take some of that out and make the stars a little bit more pinpoint. So what I'm going to do is just try the default settings. I have a feeling it won't be good, but we'll just let it run. I think after the first time it goes faster. For some reason the CPU is winding up right now, and fans are running on the computer. And here we come. Okay, now this is obviously way too much. If we do an undo and redo, black ringing is the most obvious sign that it's way too much. So what we are going to do is undo. I'm going to cut the iterations to maybe 5 and try it again. See the further. Okay, still too much. There's black ringing. Stars are not right. So let's cut this to 3, and I'll also cut the gradient descent a little bit. Okay, we're getting pretty close there. Undo, redo. Okay, that's still a bit of black ringing, a little bit too much. Let's try 2. Undo and hit apply. Okay, undo, redo. It didn't do horrible things to the background there. It's a little bit noisier. I'm just going to try gradient descent at its smallest possible setting, because that was still just a bit much. You know what, that's pretty acceptable. So I will hit close. We're going to have a quick look at the whole image, and I'm going to type in clear star, hit enter. Now none of the stars are selected. Undo, redo. Yeah, this had minimal effect. It did tighten up the stars a little bit at the cost of some background noise, but I think that can be corrected easily enough later. Now, another thing that's new in Siril is noise reduction. Siril has always been proclaimed to be a scientific instrument, and that noise reduction is cosmetic, not scientific, but there is a tool here now. The remove salt and pepper noise, if you read the tutorial about it, is about hot and cold pixels, kind of like cosmetic correction if you've dithered, and if you've stacked, and cosmetic correction during calibration. There really shouldn't be a lot of those issues to deal with, but you can leave it checked. Secondary denoising are different variants. I find that data adaptive dual is the most effective, but it takes a very long time to run. We have a modulation on all of them to affect the amount of denoising. Let's just hit apply and see what happens here. It shouldn't take too long. It's going to run 3 iterations. And you can see a progress bar at the bottom right here. Okay, so our background noise hasn't changed much, but I think we've lost detail in the brighter areas. In fact, we certainly have. So the long and short of this is, well, we can try this one. Okay, background is still poor. Yeah, when you're denoising, you kind of want to denoise the background more than the bright areas. Masking is appropriate, which is why I will still do denoising outside of Siril. You can also try it on a stretched image, but the recommended usage is on linear. So I think I'll just leave that one alone, just trying to introduce the tool. Okay, at this point I'm going to go linear. We're color calibrated. We've had some deconvolution. We'll go linear. I'm going to save right now again so that this becomes our future starting point. And we're going to give it a stretch. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to give it a star removal. Star processing, Starnet star removal. I've always done star removal after some stretching because Starnet really doesn't work great on a linear image. But in the tutorial about this in Siril, I've learned that there's an optimal stretch for the cleanest star removal. And if you click this pre-stretch image, this only works if you're linear. It will achieve that optimal stretch and remove the stars. And then optionally, you can generate a star mask. In this tutorial, we're just going to generate the star mask. In reality, I would probably restretch the image myself a little bit more to do a star mask with slightly brighter stars. I believe there's greater accuracy to that, but we're just going to do it this way for now. So I'm just going to do that. I've got the GPU optimization done on Starnet on this machine, so it takes 10 seconds to start, but once it starts, it runs very, very quickly. Future versions of Starnet will support Torch, which will use GPU utilization by default, but that's not here yet except in Linux. Okay, so this is done, and believe it or not, that is partially stretched. It has not touched the image we started with, but it has created a starless rtotal stack.fit, and it has created a star mask, which is the star layer. So let's just look at this briefly in auto stretch. Now this is grossly overstretched because there's so much dark space in this image. There are some slight halos remaining, but really with a reasonable amount of stretch, this just won't be an issue. And it has left behind some of the fuzzies in the image, which are actually galaxies. So let's go back to linear, and we are ready to move on to generalized hyperbolic stretch. Now, I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this. I think most of you, if you're interested in this, have seen something on it already. But basically what it allows us to do is put a curve into this thing. The stretch factor determines the size of the curve. The local stretch intensity describes, I guess, the curvature of the curve, how intense it is. And the symmetry point describes where along the histogram that it falls. So in a linear image like this, your symmetry point is going to be very low, but it probably shouldn't be 0. So there's two ways to get at that. You can just go to 100 stretch on the histogram and click somewhere in the histogram, and that will give you a symmetry point. You can click anywhere in this histogram and it will change it. But you want to be somewhere within the live part of the histogram. That gave us 0.00019. Another option is to just draw a selection and use the eyedropper. That gave us 0.00020. And we're kind of aiming at this point to be in the dark area of the image to cause that curve to lift everything above that luminance level and suppress everything below that luminance level. If you've got a nebula in here and you want to add contrast between, say, these outer rings and the core, you could put your symmetry point at that luminance level, and then your stretch would create separation between those two layers a little bit. So we're going to just leave this selection here so that on subsequent stretches we can use just click the eyedropper to get the symmetry point again. Okay, then we're going to put our histogram back to 1. We're going to turn on log view, and this is kind of important as it turns out. And we're going to give it a stretch. Now in log view, you're looking at the whole dynamic range of the image. If you're in linear view, you can't really see how far out the bright parts are getting in your dynamic range. In log view, you're looking at the whole dynamic range. And so something I learned by reading the Siril tutorial on this stretch tool is that a straight downward slope on the right-hand side of the histogram is a good thing. So here we have straight slope, which is probably the background, maybe a bit of the outer arms, and suddenly we start running into the core and there's a sudden change in direction here. We will try to modify that a little bit. The top of the bottom of the histogram is quite sharp and steep. Now if you had a big nebula in here, it would be less so. The whole line would be straight. But here we've got a lot of dark space, so it's kind of normal to have a peak of dark space and then suddenly luminance starts showing out. Let's put this into linear view so we can see what we've actually got. This is this view of the initial stretch. Now we could take it further. Okay, a few things to check. The background is balanced. The high point in the histogram is where most of the pixels are. The dark values, RGB, are pretty closely aligned. Yep, we can call that background pretty well balanced. Red is running high here. Now, I've got human weighted luminance turned on here. Independent channel values is basically histogram stretching. So you're stretching luminance, but not saturation. And look what happened to the red line here. Human weighted luminance kind of brings saturation along in the stretch with luminance, and so you get more colorful. It's something closer to arc sign stretching in the end result. And then they have even weighted luminance, which for an initial stretch I think is the best. Human weighted could become oversaturated in reds quite easily. This one, not that much different in this case. So we'll go with this as an initial stretch. So we can't touch symmetry point on an initial stretch. If I take it up even one mark, it just kills the image. So we'll leave that exactly where it is. If you are running at a dynamic range, reds are getting close to the top here, we might bring in some highlight protection to just back that off and hit apply. That's the initial stretch done. So everything's gone back to zeros here. We have to hit the eyedropper again in order to set a new symmetry point, which is much higher now. And there's a few things we can do here. If you wanted to control that red, you know what, I think I would almost leave this one alone. Red is not horrible. What we could do is bring in a bit more green and blue. So we'll turn off red now. We'll give this a bit of a stretch. And then we'll bring the symmetry point over to the point where the darks in the green and blue are not much affected. You see we've raised the brighter end and got more neutral balance in the core. So now we can bring back the intensity to adjust that a little bit. We could do this, or we could do this. But let's just say we were trying for a little less red dominance in the core, but some. We could do that, and the background is still neutralized. And of course the way you control where the stretch is happening is right here with the symmetry point. So you want to settle on a symmetry point where the background remains neutralized. And hit apply. Okay, if you needed to, let's say you really wanted to get rid of this hump, I think we're okay, but there is a flat point here. We could go into an inverse stretch, give it some strength. Oh, we'll turn on red, or sorry, turn on green and blue again. And now the curve is reversed. Instead of suppressing the darks and raising the highs. It's raising the highs and suppressing, raising the darks and suppressing the highs. So we've made this into more of a straight line, but at the cost of contrast between the core and the arms. We could also modify this by bringing in highlight protection or by bringing in shadow protection to reestablish our dark background. In this particular image, I don't think I want to do that, but I'm just saying you have a tool here that enables you to manipulate the direction of these lines in either direction. We could go back to this one where it raises the whites, but I'm just going to reset. I think I kind of like where we are here. Another tool here is the linear stretch. This is for clipping black point. We have some black here that's disposable. There's no data there. Bring it in. See, if I start to clip, it starts to show up here. But if you can bring it in far enough that you're closer to black, but zero clipping or very, very low clipping, and hit apply. Now we can go back to a generalized. Again, hit our symmetry point. It's gone down now because we darkened the background. Just going to give it a bit of a stretch. And we can play with stretch intensity. I don't think that's really what we want at this point. You can create slightly different effects even by going to a negative stretch intensity. And we can play with the symmetry point as well to establish where we're creating the contrast. In this case, we're creating the contrast between the core and the arms by dragging it way out here. But I'm going to go back to a natural symmetry point. And so basically I just play with the sliders, watch what it does to the histogram, and watch what it does to the image, and find something as pleasing as possible. Okay. Now, this haze in the background, it's highly unlikely, but it could be intergalactic flux nebula, IFN. I don't know if 4 hours is enough integration time to start seeing IFN, but I can either leave it there or by pulling the symmetry point over, I'm kind of getting better contrast in the galaxy, but at the cost of whatever that is. So I'm going to hit apply and call this stretched. Okay, I'm going to go here and go statistics. We're just looking 68, 68, 67. The background is pretty well neutral. If you want to look at it in normalized 0 to 1 scale, 10%, 10%, 10% illumination. And 10-12% is a good target for sky background. You don't want it black, you don't want it too gray. So that's just all kind of good. Now what we've stretched is the starless version. So I'm just going to hit save, make that our working copy. In terms of noise, it's still very noisy. I'm going to just try a real quick noise reduction here, and we'll see if it actually does anything good, but I'm not hopeful. Let that happen. Yeah, you see it's killed the detail in the galaxy and left the noise in the background, which is kind of the opposite of what we want. So we're going to take a quick trip to GIMP to do denoising, and I think I'll do a bit of wavelet sharpening. Again, we can do wavelets in Siril too. But the trouble is, again, there's no masking. You want to apply the sharpness to the brighter areas, not to the background. But just really quickly to demonstrate wavelets here, and again, this would be better for a moon surface, which has lots of signal to noise. But layer 2, just between 1 and 2 somewhere, and layer 3 can bring in a bit of sharpening. Now you see how that's brought in the dust lanes here. Preview, no preview. But it's also sharpened the noise in the background, so without masking, it's not much good. If you went up to layer 5, that's very large waveforms, and it's not going to do good things for it. And that's the kind of stuff you might get. So I'm just going to cancel out of that. I'm going to undo the last GH. Okay, so this is our stretched image. Hit save again just to be sure. Now I'm going to save it off as a TIFF. And something new, Astro Tiff or standard TIFF. Astro Tiff will put the fits header information into the TIFF comments. If you go standard TIFF, it'll put its normal comments in, which is the processing steps that we've done. So I'm going to do this in Astro Tiff, 16-bit, because my noise reduction requires that. We're going to minimize, and we can go to that tutorial folder. Okay, there's the TIFF. We're going to open that in GIMP. This isn't really a GIMP tutorial. I just want to produce a nice image in this. I'll try to make it as quick as possible. Okay, you can do whatever denoising works well for you. GIMP has some built-in tools. In my case, I've connected the original Google NIC collection, and one of those modules is define. It's a noise reduction, and it's going to analyze it based on sample points it's placed. A couple in the dark areas, one in the brighter area. And we have a slider. Okay, that's a bit more noise reduction than I want in the core and not quite enough in the back areas. So we got to reduce. I'm going to turn it down in order that the core maintains its integrity. No, I'm going to turn it up to help with the background. And then I'm going to put in a negative control point to cut the effect in the galaxy. And then I'm going to duplicate that control point. And you can see here that we are protecting the core of the galaxy, less noise, more noise reduction in the arms, and much more in the dark areas. So let's see what that looks like in RGB. Okay, that's not horrible. I'm just gonna, for now, work with that. I might do more in the darks if I had more time for this, but we'll just take it. Rename this smooth for smoothed. Now I'm just going to do a high pass sharpening very quickly. There's not really a lot of time for a full wavelet sharpening. We're going to go filters, enhance, high pass. I'm going to increase the standard deviation till I can see some detail coming into the core. And we're going to change the blend mode to grain merge, which is the strongest contrasting mode. So in other words, that grayscale with little lines on it, those turn into contrast points. And let's just click this on and off. So we've added pretty good detail in the core and also to the noise in the background. So I'm going to click OK on that. Now I'm going to mask it. So we're going to add a transparent mask. Click on it to make sure that's what we're editing. I'm going to alt click on it so we can see them. Sorry. Now I'm going to take this smooth layer, Control A, select all, Control C, copy. Select the mask here, not the image, but the mask, and go Control V. That pastes a floating selection, and I'm going to use this green anchor point to anchor it into the mask. Now I will alt-click the mask, and this is the mask. So the white areas are letting that sharpening show through, the dark areas are suppressing it. Now we want the galaxy to get quite a bit of that sharpening, but we do not want the background areas to get much at all. So something like this might be pretty appropriate. I'm just going to go with it. I'm going to blur that. It is the best way to do this kind of mask, and it limits the noise that's transferred through into the image. Now we're going to have a look at the image. Okay, that's without sharpening. That is with. Okay, one last thing I might do is click on the paintbrush tool. I'm going to press D to get default colors, and then X to switch my paintbrush color to white. And we're painting on the mask. I think I want more sharpening in these areas where there's lots of SNR. And I will go to less force, so we get more of a grayscale effect out here. Just a bit more sharpening out in the arms here. So let's have a look at that mask now. You can see what I've added. And then again, with and without. And the background still has noise, but it's no worse now because the background is masked off. That area is black, it's not letting the sharpening through. Okay, I'm going to flatten, and I am going to export. None of these are keeper files for me. I'm just going to export it back over the same file name. So we're going to replace it. No compression. Do not let it select Big TIFF. Do not save layers. Do not save, thumbnails okay, and color profiles is good. We're done with GIMP. So back in Siril, we're going to open that TIFF. There we are. Sharpened, smoothened. Actually, that's not bad. That's pretty decent detail in the core. Now, it was 16 bits, so I'm going to convert it to 32 to match the star mask. I am going to save this now as a fit file. GIMP.fit 32-bit save. Okay, now remember we exported an Astro Tiff? Look, we're still plate solved. We can still annotate. We can still put the compass and astronomical grid in. We could still, if we had stars in this image, do astrometry on it. So that Astro Tiff is kind of cool. I don't know if Photoshop would preserve that, but GIMP does. It just takes all the information, the FITS header information in the comments, and it leaves them there when you export again. So Siril can open that, and it's super. It's good. Okay, last thing is bringing the stars back in. There's two options. We can use pixelmath, which is quick and easy, but those stars have not been stretched, or we can use another tool in star processing, star recomposition. So in this case, we'll load up this image, which is the GIMP.fit, and we'll load up the original star mask that was created from a near linear state. Now this one, it's kind of tricky doing this, but it's not stretched, so we have to stretch it, and we have stretching tools. Click Advanced, Modified Arc Sign, Independent Channel Values. I am going to go for human weighted. It brings the most color in. And we need a symmetry point. I am just going to draw a rectangle and hit the symmetry point, which is 0, because the star mask, remember, is starry minus starless. It leaves everything except the stars at 0, so that's okay in this case. And we're going to give this a stretch and just see what we can come up with. Okay, stars are coming in. Now, they're really round, almost artificial. I guess that's a result of the very low stretch when they were extracted. And colors are washing out a little bit. If I stretch these separately, then with the Siril command line, I could add a little bit of blur to them. But again, we want to get done this today. Black point, there's nothing really much more to do here. The only reason I hit the advanced tab was to be able to go to the human weighted luminance. So let's hit apply and just try. Okay, that's actually off 0 now. Now we can play a little bit more. You can see obviously. Yeah, maybe we can just do a little bit more to get them looking a wee bit less perfect. See what the impression is. Yeah. See, we have a little bit of uneven lightness in this. Like I say, with a bit of Gaussian blur applied to that layer only, we could clean that up a bit. But hit apply, and then we can just close it. We have an unsaved star recomposition result. And at this point, I would export it back to GIMP so that I could add a nameplate, and we can crop it here or there. Doesn't really matter. But the last stage, because it only exists in memory, the save button is not enabled. As a last stage, we would just give it a name. Let's call it final.fit. Save it, and then if we were going to publish it to Facebook like it is, let's look at the size of it. 3,000 by almost 3,000. So let's say we wanted to cut that down to 40%. Resample 0.4. Now anything, I should also mention, anything you do in the command line here, and in the new version of Siril, many things are possible in the command line, but anything you do here has no undo. So you always want to do a save just before you do anything over here in case you have to revert. Anyways, let's do that. It is now, oh, it didn't take. There we go. It is now 1105 pixels, and let's just say we wanted to publish it on Facebook like that. We would save it as final.jpg, quality 100, because you're already looking at Facebook compression. And let's have gimp.fit. Anyways, final, I misspelled final. There's the final JPEG. And the only other image in here was the starless TIFF that we did in GIMP and sent back to Siril. So I'm going to call generalized hyperbolic stretching done now. So I'm going to pause the video, and the last thing I want to do is going to do a brand new pixelmath example with M82 using OSC and narrowband data. Okay, I'm back. We've changed the setup a little bit. I was going to do this whole image for this tutorial, but it just got too long. So we're going to start here with a starless M82 stretched using much the same techniques as I did earlier in this tutorial on M106. This is the Cigar Galaxy in OSC, that means color camera. 4 hours integration of 120-second subs. We took it starless, we stretched it. The only difference in this workflow to the other one is I stretched it and then removed stars. So the stars, when we bring them back in, will be much less perfect, let's put it that way. But this is about combining OSC data with narrowband data in a different way. In another video I did adding HA to galaxies with pixelmath, which worked okay for that sample. I also did a pixelmath on combining narrowband channels in different ways. So this is completely new. It's OSC with broadband, and we'll be using a maximum function instead of an addition function to bring this in. So let's proceed. Just to make you familiar with what I've got here in preparation, we've got this image, which is what I just showed you. That's the stretched stack. We've got an HA mod, which is a starless HA sent through GIMP for healing, that's removing halos from stars, for contrasting, and for noise reduction, then sent back to Siril. So that's going to be our HA layer. And then in order to combine OSC with narrowband, you have to split it into red, green, and blue. So we've got a green, blue, and red split to bring into pixelmath. And then these PMRs are just various iterations of what we've done here. So I'm going to launch pixelmath, and there's a couple of new things in there I'll be pointing out. We're going to add our subs, the HA mod, the green, blue, and red, that are just the channels from the stacked image. We're going to rename these to make pixelmath easier. So H, enter for that one. B, enter for B, enter for blue. G, enter for green, and R, enter for red. So we're going to untick use single RGBK expression. If you use single, this is useful for, you can combine two color images, like adding starless to a star mask on one line here, but you cannot use a color image here and a grayscale here and a grayscale here or any other such combination. Now apparently PixInsight can do that. You can load up 3 color images as channels and combine them. And that's kind of the basis for a new colorized SHO processing technique that at this point we can't do, but we can't really ask for either. It's a little over the top. But anyways, we're just going to put in R in the red, green in the green, and blue in, whoops. Sorry, working around this microphone throws off my hand positioning, and hit apply, and it's the same image recomposed from its 3 separate channels. Now, if we wanted to try to add HA to this, now you notice also that there's been no cropping. I mean, I could have cropped very early in this to get an OSC image of M82, but the trouble is we're combining HA data, and to get exactly the same crop and have the same size fit file and the alignment all correct, it's not likely. So we're dealing with uncropped everything. There are stacking artifacts and whatnot at the edges of this image. Let me just put it into a histogram view. There are stacking artifacts and whatnot. Looks like I might have to think about my flats on that one a bit too. But we're dealing with full resolution images for now, crop later. So a traditional method might be to do something like R plus, let's go R plus bracket H minus med bracket H bracket bracket. Now this is one of the new things. We used to have to calculate the median of an image. Now they've got a function. If you go into the functions here, they have mean and median. They've got minimum, maximum, all kinds of things. So that's one new addition. So let's just try that. Okay, obviously over the top, but by subtracting the median, it did not stain the background too badly. Let's go K star, all that. And then we'll use a parameter K equals 0.2. Okay, got to be careful typing. Equals 0.2. 0.3. 0.4. 0.5. That's not half bad, although it's staining the galaxy more than I like, which would be tough to deal with pixelmath. But it's starting to bring the H alpha into this galaxy. But there's another function that we can use. It's called maximum. So we're going to go max bracket r, comma. Then we're going to go K times bracket H minus med H brackets. So that's all closed up, and one more bracket for the max function. Let's just try that and see if it parses. Okay, that parsed. Now we can play with K. Let's just make that 1. Let's make it 1.5. Let's make it 2. Okay, too much. 1.7. Now let's go H minus med H. Is that enough brackets? Yes. H minus 0.1. See, now we've retained some of the H alpha being added into the geysers here, but maintain better galaxy color. So we just play with that factor a little bit. Now we're starting to lose, so we'll bring up the multiplication a bit. Okay, and that's 0.15. Okay, that's kind of a non-winning game. Let's go back to 0.1 and cut the multiplier, the K value here, a little bit at a time. 1.8, 1.7, and I'm going to go back to the median, I think. Yeah, that gives us no, I think median. I'm going to put a bracket in there. And a closing bracket for it. We're going to go inside that closing bracket and go H minus median H times 1.1. I'm just playing with the numbers here. Okay, now that has given us a pretty clean galaxy and pretty good illumination of the H alpha emissions from this galaxy. So I'm kind of happy with that. Now let's just say I wanted to save this. See this little drop down button here and the presets. Now here's an earlier version of what I was working on with this, where I worked out the median value at 0.075. Here's some show expressions, here's some normalization expressions, here's K times S plus 1 minus K times H is a show expression that can be used for the red and green channels depending on the value of K. So you can save these. I could save that right now, but I'll probably never do M82 precisely again, so I don't think I will save this one. So I won't put it into the presets, but I could, and then it's available just by double clicking on it in the future. Okay, now one other thing that has happened here. Let's start hovering and watching the RGB values. Okay, in this case, they're staying below 100%, but in another version that I did, they were blowing out over 100% in red. And so they have this new output. Rescale output. We're going to hit apply. And see how it took it all down? And this can avoid, if you had, say, a red value right here at 120%, that's going to be clipped when it's rendered. So if you rescale, it takes it right back down well below that level. Okay, right now our brightest zone is 91%. That's not clipped, so that's okay. But if we were clipped, we could hit rescale, hit apply, and then we could just stretch it up again, but without hitting the clipping point. So that's actually a really good tool, and that's something else that's new in this version of Siril. So I'm going to go with this. We're going to close it. At this point, it is only existing in memory. It has not been saved on the disk yet. It's pixelmath result. I'm going to mess with hyperbolic stretching a bit. We'll get a symmetry point, maybe at the high end of the darks here. And let's just see if we can get a little bit more out of this. Okay, that is too much. No. See, at this point, yeah, that's okay. That's okay. We don't want any stretch intensity, though. Now, at this point, we're potentially clipping the reds here. Let's see where it's happening. 86, 58. No, I don't see any clipping going on. I'm just hovering and watching the bottom right of the screen down here. 93% is the highest I see, so I think we're okay. We could put in a little bit of highlight protection just to avoid backing that off. Okay, and let's just undo that and redo it. Okay, I like that effect. Something else we could do with generalized hyperbolic. Just going to put this in here again and go back to log scale. We could bring the blues up a little bit. Let's turn off red and green. Give a bit of a stretch and then bring the symmetry point over here to the point that we're raising the high end of the blues. If you wanted to bring some blue into the core. No, I think that's just costing contrast to no great effect. So I'm just going to close that without applying it. Okay, I'm going to save this as, let's see, PMR is my shorthand for PMR3.fit. Save. Now I'm going to bring in the star layer. So we'll go to star processing. We'll bring in okay, where did that go? B2 stretch. Did I hit this instead? Yeah, there we go. And we'll bring in the star mass that was produced earlier in the processing. And see, that's already pulled these stars when it was already quite stretched, so they are way less than perfect. A person could work with them a little bit in GIMP or whatever, do a reduction, even out the coloring within them a little bit, but we'll just see if that needs any stretching. I think I would do human weighted just to preserve colors as best as possible. Let's look at the whole thing. Okay, now I'm going to set the selection to 4:3 is kind of a nice ratio, depending on where you're publishing something like this. And I can do a crop, and that could be our final combined image. Just another way of combining data. And of course, at this point, you could work with saturation, perhaps. See, to me, when people do this kind of stuff, it's just over the top and kind of ruins the image. I mean, the natural galaxy color is kind of neutral to white, maybe a bit of blue. Yeah, I don't think there's really anything I want to do with saturation on this. I would just call this done. Maybe 10%, 15%. Let's hit apply. And we'll PMR3 final. Save it off, and that is done. I'm afraid that I've changed location, having a bad hair day and whatnot. I don't have the external camera set up for me. That's probably a good thing for you. But I'm going to wrap this video up. It's plenty long enough now. I just wanted to run through the major changes in Siril, and like I say, doing so by working a stack and tripping on them. There's a lot more depth in all these things. The tutorials and the online documentation are excellent, and they are where I learned most of what I've been doing with this new version of Siril. So the tools are there, and it's surprisingly easy, given a basic understanding of how the whole thing works. So thanks for dropping by. I do appreciate it, and we'll see you again. I'm not sure what my next project is. It might be a variable star. It might be more narrowband stuff. That's likely, because I've got the monocam now. We'll see where the road leads. Thank you.